All right, welcome back to Athlete's Pursuit. Thanks for joining us today. Got a really exciting episode that we're going to dive into. I got Kristina Centenari joining me again. Welcome back to the show.
Happy to be here.
Round 2 for you.
Round 2.
You're like a recurring
honored.
guest.
I'm honored, honestly. I got a lot to say.
Yeah, about a lot of different things. We're going to have a really cool talk, man. You and I have always had really good conversations about like just psychology and performance from like a coaching perspective and just about our journeys too with mental health. And so that's what this conversation is going to be centered around. I have never really had a conversation like this where we're diving into our mental health journeys, what that even means, how that has evolved from where we were when we were young as kids and that process to where we are now as coaches and kind of seeing things different. So I'm excited to get into this conversation with you.
Yeah, me too. Right up our alley, honestly.
It is. It is. It's a big, and so when we get into this talk today, it's going to be kind of a little evolution of the conversation. And we're going to start a little bit about our childhood, some of our perceptions around performance. And we're both athletes, a lot of pressures around that, and what we learned through the process to develop a healthier relationship to things. Because I do think and recognize that it's very important to us to perform at a high level. I just think it's about doing it within balance. Yep. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, we'll start from the beginning here, but foreshadowing to the end, something that you and I have both learned over the last decade or two is that in order to perform at a high level, you need sort of this like variability. It can't just be top 24/7, 100% of the time, which is probably what you and I used to think it was.
Absolutely.
And now we kind of have these peaks and valleys that just provide a little more balance, a little more peace, so that we can continue to rise again.
Yeah. Cause it ironically, I want to be performing at that top level, but you understand that if you keep pushing and pushing and pushing without a counterbalance, that it really does quite the opposite.
Right.
Like burnout, you crash out.
Right. Yeah, we'll talk about stress. I always say, gosh, like we have a fixed reservoir of what we can pull from when it comes to navigating stress, and you'll bottom out pretty quick if you use it all at once.
Dude, you will. We've both been there. So we'll dive into some of these questions. We'll go a little bit back and forth. I'm excited to see where it goes. I think we're both just in a space of just being open to have a really honest dialogue about it. Yep. Before we get into it, I want to provide some color, a little context around this conversation, because we've been talking a lot about this. And so you guys understand where we're coming from with it too. We call it mental health in the US, and we talk about it in this way. And I've thought a lot about that of like, what is mental health? Like, what does that mean? What is the feeling around it? What is the culture around it here? And I feel like mental health carries somewhat of a negative weight around it. When I think about mental health and how we think about it here, it feels like a diagnosis. It feels like something is wrong with you, like it's a disease, like it's something to be fixed. And for a very long time, that's how I felt about myself. So things that were going on with me that I'm learning about, you're like, what is wrong with me? And when we think about it that way, I feel like it does us a disservice. Totally. And I think about how the words we use around this matters, how we talk about it, how we explain it, how we define it. And I've thought about my journey of, well, how would I define it differently? Like, how would I describe kind of what I've been doing? And the best I can come up with is, I don't see this as mental health. I see this as working towards inner mastery. I see it as like, how can I learn to sit with myself better? How can I learn to love myself better? How can I show up in the world with more curiosity, less judgment around things around me, but also within myself, so that I can lead, from a better place, so I can show up better for other people. And so in that way, sometimes I don't think of it as therapy. I think of it as training.
Yeah, totally.
I don't think of it as like a weakness. I see it as an absolute strength.
Yep.
And it's a different context when you think about it that way, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, mental health it's overdone. like every time I hear it, I always sort of have this voice that's like, well, what do you really think that means every time somebody says it? Because truly it's just this umbrella term now for people who struggle with life, which is, guess what, everybody at this point. And so we have to get a little bit more, we have to narrow it a little bit. We have to get more specific, in my opinion, when we talk about mental health. And as training, I prefer to think of it as mental, emotional, and spiritual, like agility. Like stress and feeling bad is not a bad thing. That's good. We're supposed to. You're supposed to have anger. You're supposed to have sadness. You're supposed to, feel frustrated in moments. Like that means you've got a healthy nervous system and it's reacting to your environment. What we want to be more agile with is being able to come out of those emotions and then find something else that's maybe more productive or helps us think more clearly. What can be destructive is when we sort of start to chronically feel the emotions that are less productive: stress, anxiety, frustration, anger, etc. So when I think of it as more of like this emotional, and we'll get to the spiritual part, but spiritual agility rather than just like health, it kind of just narrows down, like, what's the goal here? Like you said, like you're just trying to get better. And I say this in class often, we're not here to be the best. We're here to be the best at getting better. And so if we look at it that way, there's no end point. There's no point where you should be. There's no like expectation anymore. It's just a constant process. And so mental health is this constant process of, okay, how do I just keep getting better, keep getting more agile?
Yeah. And that when we define better now, I see that as an internal, I really have defined that as like, I just want an internal peace. I want a calmness and kind of a soundness and an unwavering, unshakable confidence and love for myself that regardless of what's going on around us, right? Like in the world is crazy. Things are chaotic. Work is nuts. There's a lot of things outside of our control. So I always saw this work as, how can I create a steadiness inside myself? So it's understanding performance and having a different relationship to it, that it also allows for balance. And the things that you're talking about with these emotions of feeling anxiety or sadness or whatever, we're able to separate identity from it.
Totally.
Right? It doesn't define you. It's just something that's happening.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good point. This is another thing I say to myself as well as other people. It's easier to give other people advice rather than take my own. But
yeah, sure.
When I'm feeling an emotion, instead of thinking like, oh, I am angry, I am annoyed, I try saying, there is anger or there is annoyance, because when you can create some distance between yourself and that emotion, then it embodies you less.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, it's here, but it's not me, right? This is fleeting. And it goes back to that agility. Can we get from here to here and stay kind of light and bouncy and purposeful?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this is going to be exactly where we're coming from. I feel like that's the end of the road. This is where we've gotten to, but it's going to be important to talk about how we got here, because it wasn't always the case.
Yes.
We both had our struggles, and the thing is, the struggles will always exist. And this is why it's so important to understand. That's why we wanted to have this conversation. I used to beat myself up over this stuff of like, why am I not better? And it's a process. That's why we call this a practice. But it will be good for us to talk about maybe some of these early definitions, how we aligned with these things, how we saw it when we were young. And so let's start there. This should be fun, man. I just want to see, we're going to go through some questions to try and keep us on track.
Rewind a little bit.
But let's go back in time. Cause as an athlete, as a kid, we're talking about like the early conditioning, how we saw these things. And, what was one of the things that you were taught about strength and success as a young athlete?
It's funny. I don't know. Nobody taught me this specifically, right? My dad, I grew up playing tennis. My dad really was my coach for a very long time before I had other coaches. And I'm not saying anybody ingrained specific sort of ideals in me, but it was more this, I just sort of accumulated this idea that success came from winning and going to the right school, and then winning there, and then going pro. And it was all external results driven. And again, that wasn't anybody's fault, but I think it's a sort of a broader overall societal issue, especially in the States, where we just don't, there's so much research to show that like the best athletes perform at their best when they have a true sense of purpose. And I had no sense of purpose. It was just get to this point, then get to this point, then get to this point. And if you don't get there, then you failed.
Yeah.
And failure, which we can talk about, was an absolute, like, that was the biggest fear of all. Failure of not getting from A to B. What are my classmates going to think if I don't sign my, college contract like everybody else is doing, right? It was like this, Michael Gervais says this a lot, who's a sports psychologist who I love, but the fear of other people's opinions is such a hindrance in all of our minds. Like when you really get to the cause of a lot of anxiety and unproductive emotions, it comes from fear of other people's opinions.
Yep.
And so again, growing up, success was just all about like, okay, how are other people going to see me, rather than what is my purpose out here?
Yeah.
What am I doing on the court? Why am I playing tennis? I didn't have a good idea of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's pretty common. I could say something similar. I mean, you're a kid. You're also just thrown into your environment a little bit, right? So you're just kind of responding to where you are. But like as a young boy, like playing football, baseball, it was asserted through like being dominant in whatever you do, winning all the time. And I definitely started to crave that feeling of, because my dad was also my coach. So there was also that feeling that I wanted to do well to make the man proud. Right.
Yep.
So you just put this pressure on yourself as a kid. Because I did not have conversations about psychology at all, about like, why I'm doing this. Why do you love this? It was just always, all right, you're playing this sport, so let's practice, get better. What was your batting average this season? We gotta bump it up, work on it was all the external physical improvement.
Yeah. And, for me, it was like a lot of the instruction that was maybe teetering on some of the more mental emotional stuff was fix your attitude. It was very like
fix your attitude,
very surface level instruction. It was fix your attitude.
And what does that mean? What did that mean then?
What does that mean? I and I'm sure you were the same, as like this like wound up 14-year-old girl with a jacked up nervous system, because I got all this other stuff going on in my life. It's like, what does it mean to fix my attitude or think positively? I can't. And so, now at this point in my life, like that is a driving question in terms of how to sort of help myself and other people out of some of these like, holes that we find ourselves in, where we wrap our identity up in something external. It's like, well, okay, how do we pull ourselves away from that? Because there's steps to this. There's levels to this. You can't just do it.
No, absolutely not. No, you're still refining. It's a refinement process. That's also something that I think we get wrong, because we think about it as so if success and accomplishment is some kind of like point in time, it's like this moment that you get something done and then you're okay. You think about the same thing with mental health. You think, oh, I just got to go to a therapy session like 1 or 2 times. I talked about my stuff and I'm good. And I'm like, it never works like that. Like there's not an end goal. There's a practice to this. It's a refinement process of constantly learning, constantly getting yourself back to center. We drift away, just keep coming back. And as that kid, I certainly didn't have that understanding. And so you think about the pressures of what's Dumpling doing?
Dumpling wants to get up.
He's out. You want to talk about mental health issues? This dude needs to talk to somebody.
Dumpling's like, this is hitting too close to home. Goodbye.
He needs to talk to somebody. But you talk, I think about like, how does your mental health like suffer when you're feeling that way and you have kind of these associations as a kid? And dude, there was so much pressure, because when you talk about like fix your attitude, I heard the same thing. And when you don't, all that meant to me at the time was like, don't show my emotion. Right. So it's like, just act like I'm okay.
Right.
So if I'm frustrated, just keep it in. Just keep it in. We're not addressing anything. We're not talking about stuff. So when I played baseball, like I remember these moments where again, my dad's my coach. I'm playing baseball. I was pretty good as a kid. So I started to put more pressure on myself because I gotta lead the team. I gotta do even better. And so when I wouldn't do well, when I would have a bad game, I would strike out, had a bad day at the plate. I would just see kind of the disappointment in my dad. I started to put more pressure on myself about it. I would sit in the car. I would just bawl my eyes out.
Yep.
I would just bawl my eyes out. I wouldn't want to talk to people for a while. And all I thought about was, how can I have a better game around this? And never through high school did anybody, in retrospect, I'm like, why didn't we talk about why am I taking this so seriously?
Right.
Why can't I create a separation?
Right. That, and, the fact that if somebody were to say, hey, you're emotional right now because you care, and that's okay. Because there was a lot of especially as a guy, and I know that you can talk about this, but there's a lot of shame around feeling bad after you lose. There's shame around losing, and then there's shame around feeling emotional about losing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think again, going back to okay, how the hell do I fix my attitude? It's you got to go layers deep here, and first just understand that it's okay to actually not feel great right now because you care.
Yeah, sure.
And then we can actually get to okay, so I care about this. So what will help me perform better with something that I care about? It's actually creating a little bit of space between myself and the game, or myself and the sport.
Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of build from there. But I was the same as you. I'd get in the car, and I mean, oh my gosh, not only did I have not only was I sad after I would lose, but I was just angry. And hopefully I can say this on here, but I was just a bitch. One day my dad left me at a tennis tournament. I was just sitting on the ground, and he was like, bye. I don't blame him, but especially around that time, I mean, when we were growing up, there were no systems in place for this stuff.
Yeah.
None. There were systems about how to hit a better baseball, how to throw a better football. There were plenty of training systems.
Mechanics all over the place, no doubt.
But there are no systems or roadmaps for, okay, how do we navigate this child's emotions here?
No. Mindset was just about being ruthless. It was just win at all costs, dominate. That's all that we talked about. Right. Just focus on the game, work as hard as possible. Never a conversation about the balance. And it's an important thing because, again, you don't have the awareness as a kid. So you are reliant on your coaches and culture, right? So this is a bit more reflective of where we are as a society, if you really think about it, because you don't have the awareness yourself to make these course corrections. You have to be taught, and this isn't taught. And when you think about it now, if you tie those emotions, because if we're going back to performance, if we're tying those emotions to my outcome, to the performance, well, then my world is going to be so shaky. It's just good days, highs and lows, highs and lows, highs and lows, right? Yeah. And that sucks. Operating from that place is exhausting. And so when I started to figure it out where do we want to be? It's really I started to look at these athletes that were very steady. They were just very calm, right? So regardless of outcome, win, loss, you can be competitive. You can be upset about a loss, learn about it, but it didn't shake them. Right. It was just, all right, I'm back to work, but it doesn't change who I am. It doesn't impact how I'm talking to somebody. It doesn't impact or make me lose time in my day because I'm so angry about something and I get overly emotional about something.
Right. It comes back to the agility, that mental, emotional, spiritual agility. You're allowed to feel something, but then understanding that it's fleeting, and that oftentimes it is truly just a reorganization and a restructuring of energy that will help you come back from that experience or that circumstance as a better person.
Yeah.
Which again, going back to the beginning of the conversation, is what we're trying to do. It's it becomes really easy and habitual to be angry or sad or frustrated. It becomes so easy to stay that way. Yeah. And I truly believe that it's kind of okay, it's really easy to just lie on the couch and binge Netflix. It's easier to do that than go to the gym.
Yeah,
it's easier. For some reason, 8 out of 10 humans just kind of have an easier time feeling sad. I mean, there is a reason, which I won't go into. It's all about your nervous system. But then it actually takes some work and some practice to like, you know, find joy and find confidence and find, you know, moments where you can actually like look at something and think, okay, like, yeah, that didn't really feel great then, but it doesn't have to stay this way. That takes effort.
It does.
It's a lot easier to just stay sad, which is what, you know, I learned from college is, I was wondering why at this point in my life, when I dropped out of college, because I was having a lot of like issues, you know, mentally, it became very, very, effortless to be sad. And at that point too, I had no like strength or guidance to kind of pull myself out of that trench.
Yeah.
And so I just stayed there for a while.
Yeah. Well, again, it kind of goes back. You start to identify with it,
Right.
too.
Right.
And I think there's something big and important about that, because we tie identity to, I think, anything, because it gives us comfort.
Yeah.
It gives you a sense of familiarity.
Yeah.
You know, and so even if it's sad, you route yourself there because you know it, and it starts to feel familiar. So you go back there, and then it does take that work.
Yeah.
To broaden that perspective. It is a challenge.
Right.
You know?
I did not come up with this quote, but life is a series of choices that we make every day. Well, those choices are also mental and emotional choices as well. You know, like you're allowed to be in a moment and think, how do I want to feel about this right now? And that takes a little bit of space between, you know, the stimulus, the thing that's like bugging you, and your response. It takes a little bit of awareness to create that space, but you always have a choice on how you want to respond. And that's something I've been reminding myself a lot of lately, because I get annoyed, I get frustrated.
Yeah.
But before I sink into that and before it becomes me, right? It's like, okay, there is annoyance here. There is frustration, but I'm actually allowed to choose in this moment. Do I want to feel that way?
Mm-hmm.
Do I want to feel that way for a long period of time? Or do I want to pull myself out of it because I know I'm more productive and clear-headed when I'm not feeling that way?
Yeah. It helps me to understand that with that response, like I don't have to be victim to what happened. You know, like something happened, you can accept that, but I can also create a counter of how I want to respond to the event. And again, that's where it comes back to creating this like kind of unshakable nature about who you are, knowing what you are, and you're not tied to these things. You don't have these attachments to these things. So then as things happen to you, events happen to you, outcomes happen to you, you can still create that separation of just learning it and having an honest assessment of it. Doesn't mean that you're not being aware of the situation. Doesn't mean that you're not being accountable. Doesn't mean that you're not taking direction from it and trying to make a change. It just means that I'm not going to let it shake me.
Right. Yeah. It's this like restructuring of energy, right? Like I think that when I'm staying in a certain emotion, you can start to like just get stale there, and we can like go into Buddhist philosophy, as I think we will in this conversation, but like being sort of stuck in an emotion is said to be like this stale energy. And when you can learn how to like move, it's not getting rid of it, right? It's just like moving it to a different place, like using it in a different way. That becomes really powerful, becomes a superpower, being able to like redirect. Like again, in training, we talk about body recomposition. It's the same with your emotions. If you think of your emotions as energy, it's a recomposition of energy when you can be agile, going from sadness to, happiness for.
Yeah, it's channeling. You're really just, it's redirecting, right? Because otherwise, if you're not conscious to it, it's just like kind of spreads out. Yeah, we will get back to that. When we get into this conversation, I'm curious, what was your relationship as a kid to pressure?
Yeah.
And what was kind of missing for you back then?
My relationship, this is a great question. My relationship to pressure was very toxic. It was a toxic relationship, in which, I always like, I wanted to be in the positions in which one may feel pressure. I wanted the big matches. I wanted to, be in the finals of a tournament. I wanted to, when you feel pressure, it means that you're stepping up to the plate to potentially do something well. And so I really wanted to be in that position, but every time I would get close to it, it would just pummel me. I would have absolutely no toolkit to navigate pressure. And pressure essentially is just how you respond to stress. It's just how you respond to stress. Stress isn't good or bad. Stress is just like, okay, how am I about to handle this challenge or task in front of me, right? And I didn't have the ability to like compartmentalize these ideas. It would just be like the pressure was win, lose, succeed, fail.
Right.
That's it. It was just this very polarized sort of like ideal around the term pressure. And I just didn't have like a bigger perspective on it. It was just win or lose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I relate to that pretty heavy because you're right. I love the quote. I love the quote, pressure is a privilege.
Yeah.
Love that quote. We've all heard it before. It's what you're saying.
You're stepping up to the plate to do something.
Yeah,
whether you do, how you want to do or not, you're in that position and that's a privilege. Exactly.
Yeah. Because you got to this situation. Like if we're talking about a game, it means that you've trained in a certain way. You got a skill set to be in this scenario. It's an exciting moment, but it is also can be a stressful moment because you understand that there's an outcome that's going to happen, right? But this is a theme for me that I did not do well under pressure because I would tie so much identity to the outcome. So then I would feel so much weight that I would sabotage myself. I'd be like, here's a pressure situation. I need to step up. I need to do this. I need to get this done right. If I don't, like the team's going to hate me. My dad's going to be like, I'm not going to get whatever validation of love. My worth is going to, you don't realize what's going on as a kid, but all I remember is in my head, I would feel the weight of the world of that situation of like, I have to get this done. And then because of that, I would sabotage.
Yeah. That pressure turns into anxiety and, your anxiety lies to you, right? Anxiety is just a matter of your brain is a very predictive organ. It's a prediction machine. Every single moment, like right now, you're trying to predict what I'm about to say next. And when you're walking down the street, you might subconsciously, like you're predicting, is that person going to walk out in front of me? Is that bike going to, go by me? And this is good because it allows us to like sift through an infinite amount of sort of stimulus in every moment. However, it's not good in these situations where we're dealing with pressure and our brain's trying to predict, how we're about to do. And we're not aware that this is actually happening. Like when I started really understanding the neuroscience behind some of these concepts, it was liberating because I was just like, oh, pressure is my brain trying to predict what's about to happen. Now that's not a bad thing, but if it turns into anxiety because all of a sudden that predictive nature becomes, fear-based, then okay, how can I actually like reshape this? Because anxiety lies to you.
Yeah.
Everything that you think about, what happens if I lose, if my dad is disappointed in me, if I go out on set and I say something wrong, like that hasn't happened yet.
Right.
Right. So I think that, for me, understanding all of this sort of like mechanisms of what's going on in our brain was super liberating.
It's really, there's a freedom I think created. So it's like what was missing with these conversations around pressure is the counterbalance. Because I was so out of balance thinking about performance side of things that I had to perform at a high level. And what is needed is that detachment from the outcome so that you can perform at a high level. It's not going to define you. And because then I want to perform. I want to be competitive. I want to be in these pressure situations. Like I love it. I think it actually, when you have a healthy relationship to it, when you have a balance within it, it raises my game. It brings like a heightened sense of things where I feel like I'm pulling out my best. I feel like I'm unconscious, like I can flow in that moment and just trust myself. And that's ultimately what it comes down to, is developing a level of trust within yourself. They're like, I know I'm going to be okay. I know I got me. I've been in these scenarios before. Even if I don't do well and it doesn't go the way that I want it to do, I'm going to be fine. I got other things going on. You have a broader perspective of what's happening.
Yep.
There was a moment. This was like a defining moment for me. It reminded me of this story. I forgot about this, man. This is a long time ago. But when I was getting into like acting and like improv, this whole new world. And for those of you who don't know, I used to be in corporate America, buttoned up.
Very different.
Somehow I'm into comedy and like doing, auditions for commercials. And I'm in North Carolina. I drove to this audition and it was one of my first ones. And I get into this space. It's already intimidating. And the casting director gives me this improv scene, which I have no background in at all at this time, and says, I want you to act a certain way. Here's the scenario. I think it was like you're driving a truck and you're going to pretend like a deer hits you like within the truck. And I remember having I felt so much anxiety when that happened that all my head was going was like, be funny, do something that they want you to do. What do you think is going to be the funniest thing? So I was just so in my head that basically I bombed the audition. Yeah. I go back into my car and I remember just sitting there like fully embarrassed, just absolutely just distraught about it, being like, I totally messed that up. It was not good at all. I'm so in my head, I'm crying a little bit about it and all that stuff. And then I start thinking about this and I'm like, all right, really think about what just went down. You were so focused on doing what was right, doing what you thought they wanted to see, and being so hyperly critical to perform at such a high level. And that shit didn't work. This is what happens when you do that. So I was like, so why don't we operate from a different place? Because you want the outcome of landing the audition. Well, you tried this route and you didn't land the audition. So we failed there. So we might as well go into the next one free and loose, doing what you want to do, get out of your head. Because if you don't get the audition or if you don't get the job, we're in the same spot anyways.
Yeah.
And that was a huge turning point to me, because the next audition that I had was I did end up getting, and it was like the most improv heavy audition I've ever had. And I just felt unconscious. I just felt super loose, not worried about what was going to happen, just being like, you know what, man, I'm good. I'm going to have fun with this. And the best things opened up. I ended up booking that job and became the spokesperson of Dirt Devil.
I'm so glad you said it.
You know about it. You can look it up on YouTube. It was so much fun. I became like this comedy dude for Dirt Devil vacuums, man.
Hell yeah. I'm so glad. That's what happens when you trust yourself, man.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what happens.
That's right.
No, but I mean, like if you were to describe that evolution from, that first audition to the second one in a few words, like what would it, for me, that's like, it's evolution of trust. Because the first one you went into and you didn't trust yourself. And when you don't trust yourself, you leave yourself at a much greater risk of being crumbled by what other people may think of you.
Yeah, dude.
But then when you do trust yourself, you kind of just like, it goes hand in hand. Like you trust yourself, and then naturally you're going to stop caring so much about what other people think.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I mean, so how would you describe it? How would you describe that like evolution or shift?
With trust, it's a trust within yourself. I always go back to this quote that has stuck with me forever. That is, a bird sitting on a branch doesn't worry about the branch breaking because it has faith in its own wings. Yeah. I think about that all the time. So I'm like, but that's always the goal. That's what I'm talking about. That's where the centered balance place comes from. That if you can develop a relationship with uncertainty, you will soar. Because to believe that you have control over these situations, like we hold on so tight. And like most of my life, I was hanging on so tight to things.
Yep.
I had to control it. But that's operating from fear. And so when you can let go of that and you can be like, there's unpredictability. I don't know where this is going to go. If you can start to cultivate an excitement around that, an enthusiasm around that, a trust around that, life opens up. Yeah. I certainly have found.
Yeah, that word is like, that's it. Uncertainty. Like that we're all just out here trying to navigate uncertain times. every single day.
Every day.
Even the people you look up to the most, whether they're your favorite athletes or your favorite, this person who makes a lot of money, and you're just like, oh, that person's got it all figured out, right? No, every single day that person's waking up and also trying to navigate uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
And it's your relationship with that. When that changes, that can really set you on a different course.
Yeah.
I think one of like the biggest lessons that I learned from my experience as like, a college athlete and then dropping out and having like a very forceful break with the sport was just that we just trust. Like,
but how did you develop that moment, Casey? Like, was there, like, moving along with our story a little bit, like you're an athlete, you're playing, you're having these experiences where you're feeling the pressure of performing. You're having this kind of out of balance psychology mindset, but there's got to be a moment that was a breaking point for you to get you into this route of uncovering what the next evolution was. Like, what was that moment for you that was like, I need to change something? Like, what happened? Can you remember a moment, whether in sport or just your life?
Oh yeah. I mean, what's really interesting about this is this is gonna be a lot about other people's opinions. So for me, there were a lot of factors involved, right? The pressure of win, lose. If I'm not playing in the lineup, do I even deserve to be here? I didn't actually believe that I should have been there when they recruited me, right? So I was already coming in with this like massive amount of self-doubt. But what ultimately pushed me out was my teammates. My teammates were, tennis is a sport where it's all for yourself. And I happen to be at a program, especially when it comes to female athletes, sometimes at a young age where it's not the most supportive environment. Why? Because we're not taught that. I don't blame any of each individual teammate that I had. It's just a societal thing. We're not taught as females to support each other growing up. And so ultimately, among, the pressure to perform well, the pressure to look good, because I developed a very severe eating disorder, and then the pressure to be accepted by my teammates, that last one was really what pushed me out. That last one, I loved them all, right? And I went back my sophomore year because of them. And then there was one day where, when you're with somebody in your life who is having a hard time, it's oftentimes tough to figure out how to address them. People don't really understand how to talk to or treat people who are depressed or sad, which is you're not taught how to, right? And so, the more depressed and sad and skinny I became, the less my teammates were able to kind of like navigate that. And so what happened was, there was this very sort of like isolated distance that occurred. And there was one day I walked in the cafeteria, we would all sit at the same table, and I was a shell of myself, total shell of myself. I put my tray down, and, at this point again, I was struggling, and I think I had like 2 hard-boiled eggs on there for breakfast. I put my tray down, and they all looked at me and they all got up and they left. And it was in that moment, where, okay, I was dealing with the pressure. Okay, I was dealing with the image stuff. I was dealing with all of this other stuff. But it was when my friends left that I felt so alone. And that I felt, okay, this like something has to change, right? It wasn't even my brain that said that. It was my body. I had my first panic attack that day. I drove home from North Carolina to Baltimore that day. I never came back. But all of that to say, I do think that life has a funny way of gently nudging you in a certain direction. And then when it's like, okay, you're not getting it, it kind of just gives you a nice little kick. That program wasn't for me, that wasn't meant to be my path. And so I look back on all of that and I think, wow, all of that happened for a reason, because over time I learned a lot from that. It didn't happen right away. I spent a year in, very, very severe sort of like depressed states and taking medication I didn't want to take and learning. That was actually my first sort of exposure to learning about like neuroscience was, why do you want me to take this Lexapro pill? I can figure this out on my own. If it's happening in my brain, I should be able to figure it out on my own. And, you know, the doctor's like, well, there's chemical imbalance. It's going to help you. So I was like, all right, fine. So that was kind of like my first exposure to that. And it took a long time. It took a long time for me to, again, pull myself out of this, like, okay, I'm not a tennis player anymore, but I'm just sad girl, and into a new version of myself. It was a process.
How did you pull yourself into that? Like, what was so you had this like breaking point, and what were the early steps of, I guess, that self-improvement journey and learning how to, rewire yourself? Because obviously we're not going to the medication route, which, I agree with. This is like something that I can learn to create internally. So what were the early steps? So like, was it therapy? Was it meditation? Was it a different type of coach?
Yeah. So I did take the Lexapro for a certain amount of time, because, I was highly encouraged to by my doctors and parents, which I don't regret at all. But I would say that I don't remember that having any sort of effect. What had a big effect was something in my body saying to me, and I was 16. I had no idea what was going on, but there was something in my body that was like, okay, you're not playing tennis anymore. Let's go figure out what else is in this world. Because for the past 16 years, you've just had binoculars on to this one sport. And so I threw myself into this, it was called Knowles National Outdoor Leadership School. I just, like on a whim, signed up for this 2-week rock climbing trip. And I thought, okay, meeting new people, doing something new, this should be great. I got my ski instructor certification. I lived in Canada for a little bit. Why? Because I was like, okay, what's next? Like, I want to go somewhere, meet new people, and be active. And there's a big world in which I can do that. And so certain things like this, I started doing in that year. And what changed my life truly was the people that I met. Just like it was sort of the people and the relationships and the am I accepted or not that drove me out of that institution. What pulled me out of the trench afterwards was these new relationships that I started forming, and just getting a sense for like this broader world outside of the one behind my eyes. That's probably the biggest thing now that I tap back into often is like, there's a bigger world, and there's a whole other, infinite amount of realities outside of yours. So if you're sinking into yours, like, recognize that yours isn't the only one. There are other people out here, right? So there's this, again, it's pulling yourself out of yourself a little bit, pulling yourself out of this trench, and sort of like having this bigger picture. But I will say that when you're stressed, going back to a neurological level, you're stressed as this thing to your brain where it puts the binoculars back on.
You like narrow.
It narrows because your sympathetic nervous system's like, I got to just focus on right now what's in front of me.
Right.
And it loses track of all of this long-term, like sort of like bigger perception, perspective rather, type of thing. And it's just like it locks in on, the girls hate me. I don't want to take this medicine. I'm feeling shitty, And so again, once I started to understand that, I was like, okay, I'm stressed, but this is not the only reality. Like, there's so much outside of this. I just have to show myself a little bit of grace in this moment and be patient with myself.
Yeah. The way you're speaking about it already makes a massive difference, right? This is what I'm going back to the earlier point of how we converse about this, like the words that we use, like you're being very gentle with yourself now, right? Like, it's just an understanding. It's just a broadening of perspective, but we're so aggressive with it early. That's what I'm saying. Early on, it was, what is wrong with me? Why do I feel this way? Why am I anxious? I'm anxious.
Yeah.
But it's not, I'm anxious. You're feeling anxiety.
Yeah.
It's a massive difference.
Yeah.
And so, the journey to get there, I have a similar road. I mean, for me, it was, the passing of my father and then my grandfather. That was a big year. And I think looking back, it was like this moment in time where that element of control that I used to feel and have was kind of was being removed, because a lot of the approval I was looking for was like of my father doing the right things that I thought I should be doing. And I was a little scared to branch out onto my own. And that was that turning point where for the first time in my life, I think I was starting to analyze all the things around me, of environment, the people I'm hanging out with, how I'm spending my time, the work I'm doing, in the narrow field of view that I think I had at that time in my life. I had not traveled yet. I had not experienced different cultures. I wasn't very well read on different things. Yeah. That put me on this path of therapy, which is always an interesting conversation. When we think of therapy in the US, again, I think we go back to there's a diagnosis. You're crazy, like a psychopath. Something's wrong with you. When you learn about this, I was fortunate, I think also for the record, that the woman that I was working with, I still work with to this day. So I have almost like a 10-year relationship with her, was a great fit for me. And it's really psychotherapy where we're not talking about what's wrong. We're talking about a development to understand and how to operate with a little bit more presence in the world, and empowerment. So that's why I call it inner mastery, because it became this conversation of how can I be better by simply understanding the relationships that I have to things, and the stuff that I would feel guilty about. Can I detach myself from this or develop an understanding from it? This is one of the biggest turning points I've ever had in my life, because I was defining things in such a way that did me such a disservice. Yeah. You know, like I always felt guilt around myself, or I'm not enough. I'm not performing well enough. And how do you start to heal those things? And the reason why I'm such an advocate for this stuff is because it's similar to how you train your body, where I just want to develop an understanding to unlock myself. So again, going back to this idea that I want to perform, I want to become my best. I just want to do it in a sustainable manner. And I started to realize through this process that any block or limitation that I had in my own life of where I could go, whether it be personally, my relationships, financially, spiritually, in my career, in my physical pursuits, were only limited based off of my associations with them. So if I could unlock that and work on the things that I see in my own mind and develop this broader perspective, the whole world starts to unlock.
Yeah. Get yourself out of the way.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah.
To put it very, yeah.
So you've been with this therapist for a decade.
Yeah.
That is pretty incredible.
Yeah, I think I recognize it's rare.
Very unique.
Yeah.
Can you recall when you first started working with her? And was there any sort of like resistance from you?
I wouldn't say that I had a resistance to the conversations, because I was actually craving these conversations. Yeah. I was looking for someone to have these conversations with. The thing is, she just facilitated it. I had a resistance in myself of when we started to talk about things. I recognized I had to sit and I really had to reflect on this stuff, because it felt like I was seeing the world this way. Then we would kind of have a conversation. She would help me see it a different way. I would have to reflect and think about that. And there was a resistance to move to that transition, to just kind of see the world in a different way.
Yeah.
There was that. But I was craving those conversations for sure. I was always the type of person that wanted to understand. I feel like I was always very curious, but it was very difficult to find friends, family, an outlet to really dive into these conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I asked that because I think that like people should really hear that. Like, it's inspiring to know that you were craving these conversations, and as a male, and you were modeling at the time, and like you have this persona of somebody who doesn't need to ask for help, but you did. And you did because for whatever reason, like you had this sort of like greater sense of self, and that's innate. That's inherent. I, on the other hand, being this little, like, I still have trouble asking for help, but I remember leaving college and I saw 2 different therapists, and there was a lot of resistance from my end. I went into these conversations and I thought, there's no way this person's going to understand what I'm going through. There's no way this person's going to be able to fix me. I can only fix myself. Can I fix myself? Right. So like looking back on that version of Kristina, I use that as well to just like remind myself now that like, hey, that you didn't do that alone. Right. The 2 that I saw, they didn't hit like you. This is also somewhat unique, as I think oftentimes people just kind of have to be patient and like therapists shop before they find the right one. It's a process.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I probably didn't give that enough time.
I got lucky.
Yeah. But when you do find one, you see how powerful it is, right? Especially when you do feel alone. Like when you do feel like I felt alone, but I felt alone in a way where it was like nobody on this planet Earth is going to understand my pain. No professional, no therapist, right? Yeah. And that was that is very indicative of where my head was at. But you went into this like with some understanding of like, no, you're searching for this and you're going to stay open-minded to it.
Yeah. I'm like, there must be a better way.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, teach me, man. I've always been coachable.
Right.
That's why I relate to all these people that are trying to improve. So I just look back and I'm like, well, the resources here were just non-existent. It's just very difficult to find this information. It's difficult to find this path. We don't talk about, because that was a question I had. Well, like, what's the path to self-improvement? See how we talk about it here too? Self-improvement. It's a packaged up, it's buying a book. It's always some product and packaged up. And I'm like, this has nothing to do with that. This to me is a spiritual journey. It is something you got to be kind and gentle with yourself about. So that, and it's not something that's just packaged up all neat and nice, man.
No. And this is what there is frustration that I feel with our culture here when it comes to mental health, because it's very like, here's a book, read about how to improve yourself.
Yeah.
And, we can get into this, but mental health is it's a spiritual topic for me at this point in my life. And with everything that I've learned and am continuing to learn, it's not like, here are 5 ways that you see on Instagram to like form a morning routine to make you better, right? Like there is such a spiritual lack there, because really when it comes down to it, you will find joy and happiness in your life when you are able to connect and serve others. Like, it is just, look at what we do as coaches, right? And it fills our cup the most when we know that we're helping people get stronger. Like with you and, your partner, it's just like, it fills your cup to like be there for that person. And so that is the spiritual aspect of all of this, is that, we live very selfish lives. Like the self-improvement industry is a $13 billion industry or something. And it's all about, how do I get better? How do I get 6-pack abs? How do I form a morning routine? None of it is like, how do I help others? And when we reshape that sort of like perspective and look at it through a new lens like that, it's not only freeing, but it truly like gives you this pure sense of joy. And I think it was Thich Nhat Hanh said something like, it was this, I don't know the exact quote, but it was essentially, you have to love yourself in order to love others. And so that is where this self-improvement comes in, because you like self-love is a prereq to loving and serving others.
Yeah, I agree.
But it's not just self-love in isolation.
No. Right?
There's a bigger reason why you're doing that.
Yeah.
That's what we're missing.
Yeah, I agree. That the self-love, the self-compassion journey too, is a difficult one, because to get there, that could probably be summed up as like the biggest transition of like where you start with therapy and kind of this journey. That's really what you're trying to get to. I mean, if we're going to do an overarching thing, this is a human response. We're all trying to get to a spot of like self-love, self-compassion, so that we can give more to other people. And that sounds really nice. So it's like, okay, I love myself. Like, I like who I am, right? But it's not that simple. It's not as simple as I just say this stuff, right? I was always told, well, just love yourself. Just have confidence with yourself. You can't get there unless you get this work to unpack the things that are going on. And we have to recognize, like, this word trauma is like tossed around all the time. We all have some version of trauma. It doesn't matter how, in comparison to anybody else, we all have things that we've gone through that we haven't unpacked. And so the biggest strength that I've ever learned with this stuff, like people that think therapy is like a weakness or seen as some kind of a weak thing, I challenge that heavily, because I'm like, how can you say that you're strong when you can't sit with yourself?
Right.
Like, a strong man knows how to sit with discomfort, not just push through it. Right. And everything that we're taught is to push, is to ignore and push. And the biggest strength that I've ever developed to this day that has helped is to sit, is to be with the discomfort, the things you don't like, detach the identity to it, learn, have a curiosity about it, not a judgment, a curiosity about it. So you can create some kind of a learning about how you connect to the rest of the world, how you connect with yourself, so you can get to this place of self-compassion. And then you're operating from a balanced place. Yeah. You know, I can have honest awareness. I can have honest self-reflection. I can look at a situation. I can say, I didn't do great on that. I can learn from it instead of beating myself up about it.
Yeah.
I can get back to center and keep moving forward.
And all of this is just going to make you a higher performer. Like, when it comes to kind of like convincing people to do this, I find that especially in like Western culture, if you package it in the, you know, here's a package of more productivity, higher performance, higher functionality, clear thinking, and and all of that comes with all of this, right? It
does. Now,
if we were sort of more like delving into Eastern ideals, it's like, it's not about your outcome. It's about finding like the utmost inner peace, and that should be enough. Listen, that's never going to be enough in America or like our Western culture. Inner peace, people are like, okay, cool, nice, but I got to make money. I got to serve my family. So inner peace, you know,
it's true.
Right. So, but they go hand in hand, which is why it's really important that like, and especially, oh my gosh, I mean, we can talk about this, especially in our masculine culture, our male sort of like dominated culture, there is a resistance and a reluctance to anything along these lines of what you're saying. Any sort of like, let me sit with myself rather than let me push through. Yeah. Right. But I mean, I think that you're leading the way and kind of like trailblazing for other people to understand that, hey, this is going to make you a better human being. It
does. I've seen it as like the absolute highest level of strength. That's what I'm saying. It's never made sense to me of like how you can say that you're strong, but if you're always running away from things, you're never going to be as strong as you possibly can. Like, if I'm running away from my emotions, if I'm always operating from fear of judgment of other people, all that does is push you further away from connection. And so it's ironic to me, because we talk about men being strong, but you're scared of your own shadow. So if you can sit with yourself and learn more about yourself, even especially the stuff that makes you uncomfortable, without a judgment towards it, eventually you get to a spot where you have this peace inside of you, you know, and you cannot perform your way to peace. You have to learn to sit. And so it becomes this, I always think about the yin and the yang, and I think about people that are high performers, but that are warriors, you know. I even know these, you know, like people that I think about this one guy, Rudy Reyes, who, you know, was a Marine, who is a massive, great athlete. Like, I love the way he approaches this, because this dude knows how to fight. He's the most as masculine as you can get. But then he talks all the time about this, you have to have a counterbalance, this relationship to stillness, to a peace, because you can't just keep running this way. You're gonna burn out. There has to be an opposite. And like, the role of men needs to be, because we have a presence, because there's a natural strength of just like size and power, you step into a room and there is that inherent strength. So instead of thinking of using that strength to create domination in a space, I think it's our role when men are being their best is to facilitate a healthy place for other people to be able to step in and lead. That we should step back and create safe spaces for people to show up better. That it's our role to protect, not dominate. Yeah. So we have the strength, and why not use it to create a safer place for our communities instead of abusing it?
Right. Or trying to prove it.
Or prove it.
I think that's the big. That's
just
the
be
thing.
it.
Just be it. Just exist. Honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, women do it too. We're trying to prove ourselves over here in different ways, and it's the same. It's interesting because your brain runs on proof, right? So I think that's often why we tend to do this, is because when we go back to like the predictive nature of the brain, it's just like if we're in a big moment or we're about to do something that we really care about, whether you and I step on set to teach a class, or I have a race, or somebody's got like a big board meeting. Before big moments, your brain is trying to rely on past proof to predict what's going to happen next. And so part of me thinks that this is why we kind of like subconsciously strive to really prove ourselves. But there's a lot of magic and power in just like trusting that you have it, right? And again, that'll kind of like just take you forward, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. I mean, the end road of this thing, is that embodiment factor. You're doing all this work and you come to this conclusion, like as you're in the early days of like learning about yourself, you're reading different things like Zen Buddhism and different principles, and it all comes back to a place of just understanding that all you're trying to do is be this thing.
Yeah.
Because then that doesn't have to prove. Then there's a confidence in it. It's balanced with humility. You exist. And that, I think, is the magic of all of it. So when we look from the outside of that, you see these people that are very composed. They know who they are. They feel like very, just centered. And I've always wanted to march towards that. And I think that is ultimately the goal. There's a lot of external action to prove internal. And why not flip that on its head?
Totally.
The internal then will, when you are these things, when you feel great about yourself and you've done this work, that's the ironic part. These external things will be a byproduct, like you'll show up at your career differently, better, probably with better boundaries, more direction, more passion about what you're doing. Yeah. So you can give back at the highest level possible. At the end of this, isn't that just it? Aren't we trying to be our best?
Yeah. This is what we're talking about here on a broad level is just going to be like a societal revamp. Like I truly believe that because this stuff has to be practiced in order to like really be embodied, we have to have different systems set up from grade school to sports to like industries that we work in to, it's just like when I take a big step back, it's like there just has to be a total like revamp here, which, you and I are a part of. We can continue to use our voices and our platforms to keep pushing that.
Yeah. I like to think that we're starting that work. Yeah. This is let's go there a little bit. So, because you recognize then that this is so environmental. This is cultural. So I've always felt that we are fighting against, our environment, because to do this route feels like you're going on it alone. It feels like you're trying to find all these resources alone. And when I think about it now, I'm like, I wish that wasn't the case. I wish that this was something that we cultivated, that we talked about this from like a young age to create better awareness, to understand your emotions, to develop this framework around these things. And so now, why don't we start, like, what is your practice today to keep yourself in this balanced position? Like, are there things that you have that are, whether it be these meditation practice, breath works, like techniques, rituals that you have baked in?
Yeah. So, I mean, to your question, like, how do we do this? I'm really steadfast about what I'm about to say next. I think that there are individuals who can really push the needle in sort of like getting these messages across of like deeper purpose, inner peace, response versus reaction, like, and changing your life that way. This is driven by individuals first, but those individuals are going to make big splashes if they are actually like doing as well as talking. There are so many people out there who are just talking and they're not actually like living it. And so I think, I look up to people who are like not putting their life on hold to do any of this stuff. They're incorporating it in their lives. They're elite athletes who are doing it. They're, I'm a big fan of Dan Harris, and I think he is the embodiment of a doer and a student. And for me, his voice is very loud as well. And so, to your question, like, I'm just trying to like continue to live my life and keep performing and keep striving for, like, that's just me. That's never going to change. Like, we're always going to want to be the best.
Yeah,
we're pretty close.
Love the
right. We're all, we love it. Like, we thrive for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying toss all that aside, but being able to create some space in your life to learn about some of these other ways that you can implement like stillness within all of that chaos that we love is really important. So what I do is, I meditate and I do breath work. My meditation practice is not strict. There are certain points in my life where it is more strict, especially coming off of, my silent retreat 2 years ago. It was very strict, but meditation is a way for you to do exactly what you just said. It's to sit with yourself alone in silence, which I think it was Marcus Aurelius, some philosopher said that's the greatest downfall of man, is that he cannot sit alone in silence with himself. Meditation is sitting alone in silence with yourself, breathing, and being able to, again, watch your thoughts and your emotions as if they were somebody else's. So it's detaching and creating that distance between you and whatever's flying by above your eyes, right? And then there are different types of meditation, and I do one that's specifically, it's more of a Tibetan Buddhist lineage of meditation. It's called loving kindness. And so what I'll do is I'll basically, you pull your attention, and you can try this if you're listening. You're going to pull your attention to the center of your chest, right? Usually after spending a few minutes breathing, getting your nervous system to calm down, pulling your attention to the center of your chest. So that's where your heart is. Feeling warmth or brightness or something that makes you feel sort of comfortable but alive. And then choosing somebody in your life, and it could be you, but somebody else in your life who you're having an issue with, right? So candidly, for a long time, I did this and I used my ex, right? But you're taking that person and you morph yourself into the highest version of yourself to take all of that person's pain away, right? It could be somebody who's frustrating. It could be somebody who, you actually truly do want to help. And again, it could be yourself. But essentially with this meditation, with this attention on your heart, you're visualizing the highest version of yourself, and you are choosing one person and taking that person's pain away. And so that is a specific practice that I do very often because, and there's a ton of research on loving kindness meditation, a ton, but it does some pretty crazy things to your brain. Like, it changes your brain waves. It has a direct impact on your nervous system. And the more you practice that, in Buddhism, we call it planting seeds, right? You're planting seeds in every moment that you're making choices and having thoughts. And ultimately, the seeds that you plant create this garden over time. And the more you plant these seeds, the more beautiful that garden's going to get. And when you practice that seated, kind of like in isolation, right? Over time, that's going to start to translate into your life consciously. You're going to start to, be face to face with your boss who's pissing you off. And it's just how your brain works. It's neuroplasticity. You will have the patience and the love to approach that situation in a way where you're not completely defensive, but you're actually trying to maybe understand or recognizing, okay, this person's having a bad day too, right? And oh my gosh, I mean, just on a broader level, like this is what's going to make the world go around in a little bit more of a happier and peaceful way than what we're currently going through.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's sort of the meditation side. And then, I do a lot of the breath work as well, which is a little bit more of a physiological practice. It's really about sort of shifting your blood chemistry in a way that calms down your nervous system.
Yeah, which is powerful. So we were at your workshop last week, which was great, by the way, to like understand how to, and I did this on set. I didn't tell you this. I did some of your breath work, like tempos to get into parasympathetic state to like relax during like a off tonal mobility thing. It worked so well that I got so relaxed that I was like, oh shit. Like on camera, I'm like, I am chilled out right now. And I had to get myself fired up. We had drop sets coming up next. I was like putting myself to sleep.
I have the biggest smile on my face right now. I love it. Yes, Joe.
Dude, it's good, man. It's good. I went to a breathwork workshop too with Shelby.
Oh yeah.
On Sunday. This guy, his name's Big Joe. He used to play in the NFL. Big dude, way bigger than me. He's like 6'7". This dude's a tower. Yeah, he's a tower. But he put us through techniques that I've never done before. And it was a 3-hour session. I wasn't expecting that. It was 3 hours of breath work. So just constant ways of breathing to get you into a state of meditation that I didn't know you could tap into. It gets you into that deep meditative state.
That can get you into a state that mimics a psychedelic
state. That's what he was talking about, which happened. You get into this place where you feel like a deep sense of connection. You feel kind of disconnected too from the body in a way. Yeah. It's just from your breath.
It's powerful. Yeah, because again, we won't go into the nerdy science, but the thing I love the most about breathing is that you're not just breathing. Every time you inhale and exhale, there are a million different things happening in your body, from your cells to your hormones to your heart rate, every inhale and exhale. So when you can learn to manipulate that, what happens in your brain is pretty wild. And there is a lot of cool research to show the psychedelic effects of it. This is why
the way we talk about this is so important, because this is why I've always seen this as training. I've always it truly is mastery of yourself. I'm like, it makes sense to me that if I'm so into the physical and wanting to improve myself physically, which I love, we talk about that, want to perform well, want to be an athlete, I want to push myself in training, but that's only one aspect. Then there's the emotional, then there's the spiritual, there's the mental. So how can we understand our body as like an instrument? Like, why wouldn't you want to master that? So if I'm in a high stress situation, I'm in a boardroom meeting and I'm making a pitch and it's massive circumstance on the line. It's a big situation. You want this thing to happen. Well, if you notice your breathing is so high and anxiety and you're feeling that narrow vision again, are you going to perform at your best? Are you really going to be you? And so why not develop a way to create a calmness so that when you go into these rooms and you go into these situations, you're operating from that place of just, because it's a different space. It's a different state. Your energy comes off different. And I think you can really put your best self out there to give yourself the best chance of the outcome that you want, but why wouldn't you learn that? Why wouldn't you take the time to do it? And to think that it's such a myth that we have here. Cause I really saw meditation when I was young as this, I thought it was like fluffy or unobtainable. Like only like a monk would do this to hit transcendental, I can't even say the word, deep states of meditation. But it is a practice. The first time that I did it, it felt very chaotic in my head.
Totally.
Right? Did you feel the same?
Oh
Just everything.
I still feel
going nuts.
Yeah. Day to day, it's always different. It's always different. And the biggest thing with meditation, my gosh, is like, look at look at the ways in which you respond to noticing that. It's usually, oh, I'm bad at this. Immediate judgment.
Yeah, dude.
It's
Judgment.
Immediate judgment. And it's like, okay, I can almost guarantee that monks have days where they're feeling a little bit agitated here and there in their meditation, right? We have a human brain. Like, this is just how this works. And it's not about executing perfectly.
Oh, man.
It's literally about sitting with that. That's supposed to happen, and you're supposed to sit with it. Now, over time, you will have probably more good days. We'll just call it a good day of meditation, right? It's kind of like, in tennis, we say you 8 out of your 10 matches and practices kind of suck. Like, it's a game of error.
Sure.
But the reason why you keep coming back is because you are still making progress despite it being a game of errors. You are still getting a little bit better. And then there are those 2 out of 10 matches or practices that you feel great, and those stick with you. Mm-hmm. Those are pretty life-changing. The other 8 are also life-changing because they're actually like making you better, believe it or not. But once you start really feeling the effects, that's when you get hooked.
Yeah, you do. You start to see how it translates just to how you're showing up, and it really does come back to a little bit more of a feeling of peace around things, just not getting stressed out about situations. Because I'm like, to put it simply, I'm like, all right, life is going to be difficult. We're going to have situations I don't want to be in. You're going to have to do work that you don't always want to do. You're going to feel uncomfortable. I just wanted to operate from a stronger place.
Yep.
When you handle it. I just didn't, I didn't want to feel fear all the time. Cause then I started to recognize that operating from fear too is really just unnecessary. It really just slows you down.
It slows you down. And there does come a point where you're like, wow, I have a pretty limited amount of time on this earth.
Yeah.
So I kind of don't want to live most of that feeling this way.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make a change.
It's really that. That's it. That's it. Zoom out.
Yeah, zoom out. I mean, that's what hit me essentially. I think that's what I started learning at a young age, 16 to 20-ish, when I was going through all of that. It was just like, oh my gosh, especially coming out of my eating disorder. It was like, I'm not actually happy, even though I'm skinny. And I think this is making me happy, but it's not. My quality of life right now is like super low. I have no energy. I'm constantly worried about what I'm going to eat next and what I just ate, like all consuming. And there was a moment, and I think it was sort of out of college on. It took a few years, but I was just like, do I want to live my limited time on this earth like this?
Yeah.
Is being skinny that important? Or like, do I actually want to have energy, and do I want to have space in my brain to think about other things besides food? And so I use that like eating disorder, but it goes the same with your emotions. Like, do I want to feel scared and angry for the majority of my life and then die? No. And it's kind of silly but it's true. It's Joseph Goldstein, he's one of like the most epic meditation teachers, but he says, may you rest in peace. Why wait till you're dead? And I love that, right? Like, that's it. May you rest in peace. Why wait till you're dead? Why try and do all this shit that we're talking about today? For that reason right there.
Yeah. That's a big one. Why waste the time? That's where the perspective is so important. And going back to learning from Zen, that if you fall off, which you will, I do in moments daily, come back, just gently return. That's all that it talks about. Without judgment, if you fall off, come back. So if you miss the workout, come back. If you miss a day where it's not your best work day, breathe, come back. If you don't do great at meditation or you're putting just come back.
Yep.
Just be gentle with it. But that's why it's a practice. Keeps evolving. I got one more question for you, dude. Go back 10 years ago. You could talk to yourself. What advice would you give yourself in this category?
I love this question. I'm going to give you a very cliched answer, but it's all happening for a reason. I would tell her that. And if there was a different way I could say it that wasn't so cliche, I would say it that way. But truly, it's like, when you can sort of start to accept your circumstances and experiences and understand that there's a future version of yourself that's going to use it as a superpower, then you worry less. You might worry less. But I would also say to her that, nobody's going to come save you but you. And I figured that out. She figured that out eventually. But we kind of look for other people to save us, and we victimize ourselves. We think we're the only ones.
Yeah.
But it's you. You got to do it. You got to do it. You're going to have an incredible support system, but you got to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good. That's what we're doing this stuff for.
That's why we're doing it.
Yeah. Casey,
Joe,
appreciate you, dude. This was great.
this was awesome.
Nice little talk right here.
Thanks for having me on again.
I hope this was helpful to people. Because it is a process. I wish it was talked about a little bit more. This is the type of conversation that I was looking for when I was a kid. Man.
Oh my gosh. I'm hoping that this reaches kids. That's what I'm really trying to do here. And I know you are too, is just like injecting some of this into younger minds is going to be really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause when I like studying culture too, kind of closing on this thought, but I like studying culture and leadership culture of like the best team environments. And that's why, I mentioned a lot about the New Zealand All Blacks just for that reason alone. There's a lot of, these are really strong men. These are, they're beasts of athletes, right? I mean, they're playing rugby. This is a tough sport. It can be a violent sport. But what I love about it when you learn about it is how they lead their team. There's a lot of humility within it. The captains look out for the team. It's like the last person on the bus. They clean up after themselves at away games in the locker room. They don't rely on other people. There's like a lot of leadership skills to be learned from that. There's a lot to be learned from the team support that they have of lifting your teammates up, recognizing, how you all work together. And if someone is struggling, it affects the team. So raise each other up as you do that. And that's the kind of culture that we got to get back to, because that is what develops strength. Because I want to perform at a high level. I've always wanted to demand the best out of myself. So it's not about just sitting back and taking it easy and not doing things and dodging accountability. Because sometimes I think it can be miscued where you think meditation and Zen is just a letting go all the time and not performing. And it's not about that at all. It's performing within balance so that I can continue to push from a deeper energy source that's not going to get depleted, and to allow you to enjoy life, I think, honestly, at the highest level possible. And if I had to sum this up in any way, that's what it is. It's not about it's not about one job. It's not about one thing in your life. It's about a broad experience. Yep. I just want to enjoy this thing. Yep.
Joy.
The full way.
Joy.
Yes. Yes. KC, thank you.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
All right, we'll see you next time.
All right.